Ladies and gentlemen, the construction of data centers has Tucker Carlson asking some very deep questions.
Why are you acting like owners and treating me like an employee who has no agency and no right to pipe up? Who is in charge here? Is this really a democracy? I mean, those are the obvious questions that come to mind when you watch something like this.
I'm Rich Lowry of National Review, and that was Tucker Carlson sharing very dark musings about AI data centers. So I think this is worth dwelling on because Carlson really exemplifies the hysteria over these data centers and, of course, takes it to 11, as he always does. So let's get some more from him and debunk some of the nonsense and then get on to the reality of data centers and why they're so important. Some more Tucker.
They don't care what you think about it, possibly because pretty soon they won't have to. That's not like some dark conspiracy theory. It's just obvious. It's just obvious. How else would you explain this? You're rolling, I mean, even during COVID, they at least tried to tell you that you were wearing the mask and taking the poison shot and jumping on one leg and whatever they were having you do that day because of the science. They tried to convince you that you kind of had to do it because it was good. They're not even trying that now. And so you have to ask why. And again, it may be, just guessing, because they don't have to.
So the idea here is that no one is making a public case for AI or data centers. Instead, it's just an oligarchic imposition. And this is a sign that they believe they can get away with not asking because once they get the AI, they'll never have to ask again. We'll live in an authoritarian system. Does this make any sense? No, right? We live in a free society, which means you don't have to go ask anyone permission to come up with economic innovations. We didn't have a referendum on whether we would have the Industrial Revolution in the United States or not. Now, there are a lot of debates in public concern about how that unrolled, and you always have arguments about what role regulation has, etc. But Steve Jobs, for instance, didn't have to go to anyone and ask permission to come up with the iPhone. Same thing here. Now, there is, though, a big element of democratic deliberation at work in terms of the building and siting of these data centers because you need people to approve. And if they don't approve, if they balk, it delays the project. A lot of these projects are delayed at the moment, and it takes a lot of time to get through the permitting process, which is a democratic check on what you can build and where. So the idea that this is just an authoritarian project in the service of more authoritarianism is completely absurd. Of course, that doesn't stop Tucker. Here's more.
Is building data centers the same thing as achieving dominance in this space? Maybe, maybe not. Might be the most lucrative part of the whole process for developers and for BlackRock, but is it actually the same as technological progress?
He's maintaining there that building data centers aren't necessarily going to mean we dominate in AI. And this might be in part a conspiracy of the developers who just like building data centers. But developers don't just build stuff out of nothing for no reason. They build stuff because they think it's going to be economically useful and they're going to make money from it. Right? If there's no market for data centers and these things are totally a waste of time, no one would be making them. Now, some of the developers may be making a wrong bet. And you know what happens in our system? You do that, you get punished economically. You lose a lot of money or you go out of business. So the idea that developers are just making data centers so they can profit at the cost of all the rest of the American people is preposterous. And by the way, people like Tucker Carlson, they used to say, we need to build more stuff, right? We have too much of a white collar economy. We need to privilege blue collar work again and people who do things with their hands. You know who are building data centers? Construction workers. The Wall Street Journal had this piece not too long ago. Headline: Data centers are a gold rush for construction workers. Story opens: Damon Chambliss used to run himself ragged with the small contracting business he owned in Columbus, Ohio, hanging drywall, chasing clients for payments, and managing half a dozen employees. Since April, Chambliss has worked the night shift overseeing a team of 200 welders, plumbers, and electricians at a local data center construction site. He makes more than $100,000 a year, a significant increase from his previous pay, cruising around in a buggy under floodlights, overseeing deliveries and equipment, ensuring everything stays on schedule. I pinch myself going to work every day, the 51-year-old said. So that's at least one good, hardworking American who's benefiting from the data center boom, and there are many others like him. Here's another point that Carlson makes.
There's probably nothing uglier on planet Earth than a data center. It's a physical atrocity. It's an offense against God and nature. Prima facie, look at it. This is not the Parthenon. This is the opposite. This degrades the landscape.
So that's certainly true. These facilities are unsightly. But look, let's be realistic. You're not going to get people building in most of these places the Biltmore Estate or the Chrysler Building, the iconic tower, office tower in New York City. No, you're either going to get nothing. Maybe that's what Carlson prefers, or you're going to get warehouses. Warehouses don't look great either. And you know what really doesn't look great? Something, again, that populists like Carlson say we desperately need more of: factories. Factories don't look great. The Industrial Revolution that utterly transformed our economy and our lives, much for the better, were terrible looking. William Blake, the famous British poet, wrote of the dark, satanic mills in England. These things were not aesthetic masterpieces, and they weren't meant to be. So this charge also has no merit. Now, Carlson goes on to explain how worried he is about the draw on energy that data centers will represent. Other people have a similar concern, but this is almost entirely misbegotten as well. So one of the big worries is these data centers will drive up energy costs for everyone else. A guy named Nick Carter on Twitter crunched some of the numbers, found this basically to be false. He found states with the highest data center energy share, Virginia, Texas, etc., collectively have the lowest and slowest rising mean residential energy prices. He says if your energy prices are going up, you know what? It's probably inflation rather than data centers. He cites Texas, which has had a huge build out, but residential energy prices barely moved because cheap natural gas, huge solar wind, battery stations, additions, etc. The basic problem is that blue states pay more for energy because they denuclearize, they block pipelines, they have renewable mandates, they're enthralled to NIMBYism, union labor is expensive, etc. So the basic picture there is that data centers are going to states with affordable energy and that have policies that promote affordable energy for everyone. They're not going to the blue states where people are feeling a pinch from higher electricity prices because energy is expensive there because of the underlying policies. Now, what about water? There's a lot of scaremongering about this. It's made to sound as though if we get more of these data centers, there'll be no water left for anyone to drink in the United States. And a lot of this is based on a lie or misunderstanding about the water usage in these facilities, and that people are counting as total water, the water that's recirculated and reused in the course of operating these facilities. And that's made to seem as though it has to be a huge draw on original water constantly. It's not. And by the way, there are all sorts of operations that use a ton of water that no one is actually scared of or trying to shut down. We made this point in an editorial at National Review recently. It is indisputably the case that a whole host of other ordinary and typically unquestioned activities consume far more water than AI data centers, including the maintenance of golf courses, the irrigation of suburban lawns, the farming of cattle, the cultivation of almonds, and the running of breweries. How about the humming and shaking we sometimes hear about near these facilities? Again, our editorial, insofar as this is true, it is a zoning problem similar to any other. Large industrial facilities generate noise, but there's no evidence that data centers pose any more of a threat in this regard than highways, factories, airports, substations, rail lines, or any of the other facilities that make a modern nation work. Now, a lot of this fear-mongering is behind the intense opposition to a Kevin O'Leary-backed proposed data center, massive data center in Utah. But as this account has pointed out on X, this would create 2,000 jobs, this project, in a county of 65,000. That's a substantial increase in the number of jobs there. The revenue generated in the first phase of this project would be an additional $30 million a year. Then as it culminates in the next phase, $100 million a year annually, a massive increase in the tax base for this county. Yes, this facility would use a lot of energy. It's going to generate its own energy through its own power plant, not drain the grid of Utah. And the water that it's going to get are coming from the existing water rights of this property, which was bought fair and square from private landowners. So what's not to like? By the way, so far the apocalyptic warnings about how AI is going to devastate the job market just hasn't happened. We've actually added software developers lately. This is one of the sectors of the economy that was supposed to be hit hardest by AI initially. Hasn't happened, at least not yet. And then, by the way, this is perhaps the biggest point. This technological change is happening whether we like it or not. And if we shut it down in the United States of America, it's going to take place in other places, very much including in China, that's aggressively pursuing this because they realize the geopolitical advantages that will come from this, the economic advantages, the advantages in warfare. And at the end of the day, Tucker's not so enthusiastic about this as a national project for the United States because he doesn't really care about beating China at the end of the day very much. He doesn't really think we're that different from China.
This isn't about improving your life. We'll just be honest, because I can't think of any way that it might. What this is really about is achieving dominance over a strategic rival, China. Now, that raises like obvious questions like, okay, what is dominance? Why do we need to achieve it over China? In what specific area are you talking about? And actually, if we're being totally honest, like, why is China so bad? Just to let Spencer Cox know, the core of this rivalry, their system, totalitarian, our system, based in the acknowledgement of inalienable rights, freedom versus tyranny, it's simple. Why is this relevant? Because what Spencer Cox is telling you is that we are building this system not to become different from China, but to ape China, to be more like China.
Now, he's referring there to Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah, and he's citing a big difference between our two systems. But at the end of the day, he thinks U.S. policymakers and tech entrepreneurs want to impose a totalitarian system like China on the United States. So we can't have AI because China has AI, and if we get AI, we'll be just like China. This is crazy. It's a little bit like arguing during World War II. We can't build tanks because you know who else has tanks? Nazi Germany. If we build tanks, we'll be just like the Nazis. Or the same thing with the ICBMs during the Cold War. The Soviets have ICBMs. So if we have them, we'll be just like the communists. No, we need to maintain our technological and military edge so we can defend our way of life and our system of government. And no matter what Tucker Carlson thinks, those things are not fundamentally corrupt and they are worth defending, very much including with technological advance. Hey, do yourself a favor, comment, like, subscribe. I guarantee you won't regret it. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.